Well, hello everybody and welcome to another video tutorial. My name is Peter Drakulic and today I would like to be showing you how you could easily, very easily create this pebble here, which is like those we can see on the beach, okay? And you are going to do so by using just Blender's built-in procedural textures. We are not going to be using for making this nicely realistic looking pebble here any image texture whatsoever. We are going to be using just the procedural built-in textures available in Blender. And I'm doing so because I want to show you how flexible those textures can be and how can you easily create a variety of complex and realistic looking surfaces or textures through using just those built-in textures. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, let me take you for a tour around my scene. So I'm switching over to the 3D view for this scene, and you can see it's pretty much a simple scene. And this is my pebble object, which actually is a subdivided cube with some extrusions, all right? And then I have this plate behind here, all right? And I have sculpted it using my sculpt brushes, so I can give it, you know, kind of the effect of the beads of the sand on the beach and things like that. So, going now to the compositing, let me switch from over here to the compositing layout. You can see that I am using both, nodes for compositing my scene and nodes for making the materials of my objects here. For example, this is the pebble itself, you can see. Alright, so without further ado, let me switch over to my scene, to a new scene, and start making our pebble. Alright, first of all, I want to add a mesh cube, so press Shift A, add the mesh cube to your scene. Alright, and now let's tab into the mode and Control Tab, switch over to the face select mode. Just go ahead and add some loop cuts here and there by pressing Ctrl R, and so adding few loop cuts, and then let's switch over to the face select mode and scale along the Z-axis, so kind of trying to make a basic pebble shape. Alright, just moving vertices here and there. Alright, for example, I could go ahead and select those here, those two loops, and move them somewhere, and we're trying to make it looking quite random, if you prefer. So let's scale them a little bit along the Z-axis perhaps, and now let's go ahead and add a subdivision surface of level 2 modifier, and you can do this very easily through using the Ctrl+2 shortcut. So I'm adding a subdivision surface modifier, and I'm smoothing out the geometry from over here, and now I'm kind of trying to shape my pebble, alright, and so that it looks, if needed, you can enable the proportional fall off and try to give it a nice, you know, pebble looking shape. Alright, something like so. So we have our shape here. Alright, now I want to go ahead and add my plane, which is going to be my plane behind the, for the rendering, which is going to be kind of the sand of on the beach. Right, so Shift A, add the mesh plane, scale it up. Alright, now switch over to the edge select mode, and let's go to our side view or front view, extrude it a couple of times so we can make something like so. Tab edit mode, select all of the faces and scale them along the local y-axis. Somewhat, alright. So now I want to just move my pebble just a tad somewhere here, alright. And I want also to add a camera to my scene, so Shift A, add the camera. And I want to press the shortcut Control plus Alt plus 0 on numpad, so I can position my camera somewhere here, and then G plus Z twice, so we can position our camera somewhere here. If you want to change the position of your camera and you want always your camera to pointing at the pebble, you can always select your camera, Shift select the pebble object and press Ctrl T and add a track to constraint to your camera. So now I can move around my camera and always pointing, it will be pointing at the pebble object. So something like so. Now select your plane here, tab into edit mode, scale a little bit along the y-axis. Alright, perhaps also move this edge somewhere here and smooth out the geometry for the plane. Alright, so we have actually set up our basic scene here. Now let's go ahead and see how we can texture actually those two objects here, so we can have a nice render. First off, we want to go and select our pebble object and go up here to the little cube icon, and let's name this pebble. Then let's go ahead and select our plane and name this something like, I don't know, sand perhaps. And now, okay, and now let's go ahead, select our pebble object, switch over from over here to the cycles render, and I want to go ahead and add a material to my pebble. So I'm clicking on this little icon for the materials, I'm adding a new material, and by default it is a plain diffuse white colored material. Now I want to split this window here up, and I want to bring from this pop-up window or panel here, I want to bring the node editor. Alright, so if you don't see any material, this is because you have first to press home in order to of course to switch over to this material button here, this little sphere icon, and press home so you can zoom in to the material for your pebble. Alright, now let's go ahead and work a little bit further on these materials here. So I'm pressing Shift spacebar, I'm maximizing this node editor window, and I'm adding yet another material which is going to be a shader, which is going to be a glossy shader. And of course I want to mix those two together, down together, by adding a mix shader. Alright, so most of those pebbles on the beach have a rather glossy or semi-glossy surface, so I want to mimic this by using also a glossy shader. Let's keep the factor for the moment to 0.5. Now I want to add the detail on the surface of those two shaders. So one way for doing so is by going ahead and using a texture, a procedural texture, and more specifically I want to use the Musgrave texture. So I'm adding the Musgrave texture here, and I'm pressing Shift D, duplicating this. Alright, bringing this somewhere here, and now let's play around a little bit with the scale, detail, dimension, and all those factors here. First of all, I want to set the scale to for the top here texture, pebble texture, to something like 0.3. Alright, and then I want to bump up the detail, to set the detail to something like 14. Now for the lower for the bottom masquerade texture. I want to set the scale to as low as 0.018 and also set the detail for this to 14 as well. Now I want to mix down those two through using a color mix node here. I want to fit them into this mix color node, and I want to change the blend mode to overlay. Let me border select those, rubber band select those and move them somewhere, grab them somewhere here, because I now want to add yet another color mix node, and I want to fit this into the top socket, and then I want to change the color down here to a something like light bluish. Now I want to fit this into both the diffuse and the glossy texture input sockets. Now that's about the surface. I mean the color of the surface. What about the bump? Well, some of the pebbles are really glossy. They have really glossy surface, but sometimes they have also tiny little bumps which you can fake, you can simulate through using a noise texture. So let me go ahead and add a texture, noise texture here. Alright, and I want to connect this later on to the displacement output, but this later on. So let's see now how this looks like up until now, our material, by switching over here and from down here going to the rendered view. Alright, you can see it looks something like so, but we're going to fix this, alright, by lowering down the dimension factor for both of our materials. Alright, lowering it down. And of course I forgot to say you that you need first to change the blend mode with the color here to overlay. That's very important. Anyways, I want to bump up a little bit the dimension for the top shader. Let's set this to 0.1, and for the bottom shader, and also I forgot to say you to pump up the linearity, and the linearity is a very important factor. You can see the more linearity you are adding, the you can see those patterns here, alright, that are start to creating on the surface of our pebble. And also let's play with the linearity of the second shader as well. As you can see, many different shapes, very interesting shapes are being created in the form of patterns on the surface of our pebble. You can see now we have this nice looking, realistic looking pebble here, and you can keep going and playing with the linearity and dimension until you get the look and feel for your pebble that you are going for. For the moment, let's stay with these values here, and now our pebble is has a glossy surface, no bumps. If you wanted to add also some bumps, and of course you can do this by going here. Let me maximize again the window and connect the noise procedural texture to the factor output, actually to the displacement input, alright, to the displacement socket for the output node here, material output node. Now if I go back, you can see now I can play with the scale, and I want to give it a rather high scale, I mean a high value. Set this to a high value for the scale. Of course you can play around with this until you find the the setting that fits best to your liking. Let's try something like so. Alright, and as you can see now we have a pretty nice looking, you can see bumpy surface. Of course you might want to add some distortion here. Alright, and you can play around with the detail. Perhaps I want to to lower this down a little bit. Let me bring this down to be something like 50 perhaps. And very important, because now we want to add the way this texture is going to be mapped, if you prefer, on top of the surface by adding an input texture coordinate node, and I want to connect the object socket to the vector here socket. And let me see now how it looks like. Alright, so we have something like so. And you can see we have a nice, complex, pretty much realistically looking surface. Now, next thing I want to do is to add a lamp to my scene, because for the moment it doesn't have any lamp. So let's press Z and switch over to the wireframe mode. Shift A, add a lamp, and I want to add a sun lamp, of course, lamp, sun, oops, sun lamp. I want to set the size to, alright, it's okay if you set this as it is, or 0.80 perhaps, it would be nicer. And I want to set the color to a rather light yellowish color, something like so, alright. And of course I want to move this somewhere over here, and I want to give it some rotation, alright, to my lamp. So rotate it along the y-axis and perhaps along the z-axis somewhat, so it has a nice realistic, position here. Let me bring this somewhere here. And now I want to also go ahead and go to the this button over here and to add a new environment. And the new environment, I want for this to have a sky texture. So I'm adding, this adds to the realism, of course, to my scene, okay? So now let me switch over to the rendered view. Okay, let's look through my camera, and you can see we have something like so, which makes for a nice realistically looking pebble. Of course, don't forget, you can always select your pebble and play around with the scale, right, the dimension, and all those factors here, right, of your textures here, the linearity is a very important factor as well. If you can see how much this changes the overall looking of your pebble here, right? So you get the meaning. You need to play around, go ahead and play around with this. And now you might also want to set the object coordinates, and you get a different feeling, but personally I prefer this, the feel of the generated, which is by default a way for mapping the procedural texture on the surface of the pebble. Now, next up, let's go ahead and see how we can play a little bit around and create the plane, and make the plane to look like the sand of the beach, right, near the sea. So let's switch over to the solid select mode and go ahead and tab edit mode, add two loop cuts to this plane here, alright, perhaps something like so. And now let's go ahead to the modifiers and add yet another modifier to this one, which is going to be a multi-resolution modifier, and subdivide it a couple of times, alright, so that we have enough resolution to play around with sculpting it. So let's switch over to sculpt mode. You can see here, and let me for the moment close this node editor really quick. Alright, now you can go ahead and select a brush here, press F to change the size of the brush, and Shift F to change the intensity of the brush. Now you can press D for selecting the draw brush. Of course you might want to uncheck this X symmetry option here, so you can easily play around and create those kind of waves of sand, right, look, something like so. Of course you can always subdivide it even further, and you can press Shift V to select your pinch brush, so you can add, alright, again you can play around, you can get the meaning. Now let's switch over to switch over to the object mode, excuse me, and let's bring back this node editor here, and I want for this plane to add yet another material. I'm going to be naming this plane, whatever, or sand perhaps. Okay, and I want to give it a rather nice yellowish orange color, something like so. Alright, and now let's see how it looks like. A very easy way to fake the effect of the sand could be by just go ahead and adding a node color mix node here, and I want to sample this color, this orange, nice orange color, and here I want to add a texture, noise texture. Alright, so and fit this, the factor, the color here to this color socket, and connect this to the color input. Alright, and change the mode to something like I think value perhaps. Let's switch over to the render it and see how this looks like. Okay, you can see we have something like so. It's a nice looking, you know, let me switch our camera and see how it looks like. Of course, you want to play with the scale a little bit and make the scale something like 150 perhaps, something like so, and you want the factor to connect the factor to displacement. Alright, so you have also a displacement. Alright, so we have something like so. Of course, you can play around with the values and perhaps even pump up the scale until you are satisfied with the result. So in this way you can get pretty much the effect of a pebble, nicely realistically looking pebble, without using any image texture whatsoever, through using just the built-in procedural texture for your for texturing your objects. In our next tutorial, we are going probably to try to play a little bit around with compositing. Alright, this so if you like this, don't forget to subscribe. I hope you enjoyed it, you learned something from this, and I hope I see you next time with another hopefully interesting topic, hopefully soon. Until then, have fun and goodbye.